Global Insight News.
All right, so 1 minute we're all bracing for this global trade war, tariffs flying everywhere, and then the next, well, it seems like things are cooling down, for some countries at least.
Yeah, it's a bit of whiplash, isn't it? One day the markets are in free fall and the next they're soaring. Makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes.
Exactly. It's like trying to follow a ping pong match, with your eyes closed. So, for this deep dive, we are going to try to unpack the latest moves in the U.S.-China trade situation, all under the watchful eye of President Trump.
Right, and specifically we'll be looking at this recent BBC News article to get a clear picture of what's happening. More importantly, what it all might mean for you.
Right, and the thing that really jumps out is this seeming contradiction, right? The U.S. is pumping the brakes on higher tariffs for a lot of its trading partners.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they are really ramping up the pressure on China.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's like they're playing two completely different games at the same time.
Exactly. And it's kind of a head-scratcher trying to figure out what the underlying logic is here.
It really is.
So just kind of recap, a week ago, we were all, reading headlines about the possibility of import taxes on basically everything coming into the U.S.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
A blanket 10% tariff. Right. You can just imagine the ripple effect of that alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then it went even further. There were these plans for significantly higher tariffs on countries that, were deemed to be engaging in what they call unfair trade practices.
Right.
And we're talking about, big players here, the EU, Vietnam, South Africa, and the potential rates were soaring way past 100% in some cases. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, and it's no surprise that caused a lot of, turmoil, right?
Oh, absolutely.
As the article points out, that initial announcement really shook things up. I mean, we saw trillions of dollars wiped out in value, and there was that immediate fear that, consumers were going to start feeling the pain, rising prices, things like that. And, some analysts were even, kind of quietly talking about the possibility of a recession.
It's like everyone was holding their breath.
Yeah.
Waiting to see what was going to happen next. And then just when you thought things couldn't get any more, unpredictable, President Trump announces this big policy change.
Yeah, a 90-day pause on those higher tariffs for countries that hadn't, retaliated against the U.S.
Right. And then there was talk about this universal lowered reciprocal tariff of 10% while negotiations are ongoing.
Yeah, and so when they talk about reciprocal tariffs, what they basically mean is that they're willing to lower their tariffs if other countries do the same.
Right, like a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal, at least in theory.
Exactly. So it's a pretty big departure from that initial, kind of aggressive stance.
It's like they completely changed the game plan, and the markets, well, they definitely noticed.
Oh, yeah. According to the article, the S&P 500 just took off, surging by a massive 7% in afternoon trading. And it ended the day up by 9.5%. The Dow Jones wasn't too far behind, with a huge 7.8% climb.
So basically, everyone breathed a sigh of relief.
It seems that way, yeah.
But it really shows you just how closely the markets are watching every single move in these trade talks.
Oh, absolutely. And for those of you who have investments, these kinds of swings can be, a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
It really drives home the point that these policies have real-world consequences. They can affect your financial well-being.
And President Trump took to Truth Social to explain this pause. He made it clear that it was specifically aimed at those countries that didn't retaliate.
Interesting.
So it kind of makes you wonder if this is some kind of a strategic move to try and divide those trading partners, right? Pit them against each other.
Yeah, possibly.
And then you have the UK, who were already under that initial 10% tariff and weren't really in line for those higher rates. They had a much more, let's say, measured response. A No 10 spokeswoman simply stated that a trade war is in nobody's interests. And a source even went as far as saying that cool and calm can pay off.
Which is a pretty stark contrast to, all the market frenzy we were just talking about.
It really is. But it kind of suggests that different countries are looking at the situation in their own way, right? They're strategizing based on their own interests.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And for some, like maybe the UK, a less confrontational approach might be the best way to navigate these, choppy waters.
Right. And avoid becoming the next target for those increased tariffs.
Exactly.
But then on the other hand, you have China.
Yeah, China's a whole different ballgame.
Because while most countries are getting this temporary break, the tariffs on goods coming from China are actually going up. And not just a little bit. We're talking about a 125% increase.
Wow.
Yeah. And the article makes it pretty clear that this is a direct response to China's own retaliatory measures. Specifically, their plan to impose tariffs of 84% on U.S. imports.
It's a tit for tat, isn't it?
It really is a classic escalation in this trade battle.
Yeah. And President Trump's statement on this was, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly conciliatory. He basically accused Beijing of a lack of respect. And he said that he hopes China will come to realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable.
It's strong language for sure.
It is.
Yes.
And it really highlights the fundamental disagreements that are fueling this trade war. You can really sense the frustration on the U.S. side. You know, this feeling that they're being taken advantage of.
And this isn't something that just popped up overnight, right?
No, not at all.
It's been building for a while.
Yeah.
So just to give everyone a little context, it all started with an initial 20% tariff on Chinese goods.
Right.
Then the U.S. raised the stakes with an additional 34% tariff. And China, of course, responded with their own 34% tariff. And then came Trump's threat to add another 50%, which would have brought the total U.S. tariff to a whopping 104%.
Wow.
And China, according to the article, they held their ground. They said they would fight to the end.
Yeah, they weren't backing down.
And then in response to that potential 104% tariff from the U.S., China announced that they would raise their tariffs to 84%.
So it's this constant cycle of escalation, right?
Exactly. Each side is responding to the other's moves, and it just keeps ratcheting up the tension.
Yeah, it's like a really high-stakes game of chicken. Yeah. And it's making a lot of people nervous.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you consider the potential fallout. I mean, the World Trade Organization is predicting that the trade in goods between the U.S. and China could plummet by as much as 80%.
That's huge.
And we're talking about a $466 billion hit. That's not small potatoes.
No, not at all. That kind of drop would have a ripple effect across the entire global economy. And Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the head of the WTO, she's warned about the substantial risks associated with further escalation.
Right. And it's not just about the direct impact of those tariffs on specific goods. It's also about the potential to disrupt those complex global supply chains that businesses rely on.
Exactly. And that could have a domino effect, leading to slower economic growth and even less international cooperation.
It's a bit of a mess, to be honest.
It is. And it's important to remember that this recent announcement doesn't apply to all tariffs. For example, those 25% import taxes on cars and car parts are still in place.
Oh, right.
And so is the 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. So while there's this pause for some countries, those significant tariffs are still hitting certain key industries pretty hard.
Right. So it's not like everything is back to normal.
No, not at all. And of course, in a situation like this, which is so politically charged, you're going to have very different interpretations of what this policy shift means.
Of course.
For example, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he insisted that the change wasn't a reaction to those earlier market drops. But then you have Senator Chuck Schumer, who saw it as a clear sign that President Trump was reeling and retreating.
Right. So it's all a matter of perspective, I guess.
It is. And it just shows you how these economic policies are always being viewed through this political lens. Everyone's looking for evidence to support their own narrative.
And President Trump, well, he had his own take on the situation. He said that these changes had to be done because people were getting yippy. And he also said that he believes it's all going to work out amazing.
That's quite the optimistic outlook.
It is. But it leaves a lot of us wondering what the real strategy is here.
Yeah, and what the long-term consequences might be.
Exactly. So for all of you listening out there, this is something to really pay attention to.
Yeah. Because this whole trade situation, it's not just some abstract thing happening in the background. It has the potential to affect your lives in very real ways.
Right. Whether it's the price you pay for everyday goods, the performance of your investments, or even the stability of the economy as a whole. These policies can have a ripple effect that reaches right into your own pocketbook.
So it's worth taking some time to think about how these global shifts might impact you personally.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap what we've talked about. We've seen a temporary pause on those higher tariffs for most of America's major trading partners, which is what led to that big rebound in the markets.
Right.
But at the same time, we're seeing a pretty serious escalation in the trade tensions with China, fueled by those retaliatory measures and some fundamental disagreements about, what constitutes fair trade.
Yeah.
And so the overall picture is one of, well, uncertainty and volatility.
That's a good way to put it.
And that brings us to a final thought, something for you to kind of chew on. Given all these rapid changes and the stated reasons behind them, what do you think the bigger strategy is here? Is this all just a tactic to gain some leverage in negotiations? Or is it a more reactive response to global economic forces and political pressures?
And perhaps more importantly, what could be the unintended consequences of this very selective approach to tariffs, both for the global economy as a whole and for your own personal financial well-being?
Because sometimes the things that are happening in the background can end up having the biggest impact on our lives. So stay informed, pay attention, and maybe even do a little digging of your own. It's worth it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.